Let me tell you about a house near Scottsdale that was worth $800,000 on a Tuesday and almost nothing by that Friday. Nothing burned, nobody broke in, the roof was fine, the view was fine. One invisible thing gave way underneath it, and the value of the whole street went with it in a matter of days. That already happened to real people in one of the wealthiest counties in this state. Now, I want to be very careful about the word I put in the title, because I am not here to sell you panic. Collapse does not mean a town vanishes off the map. It does not mean the sky is falling on Arizona. What it means is this: when a housing market cools, and Arizona's is cooling right now, it does not cool evenly. Most places drift down a little and hold. But a handful of towns have a specific, nameable weakness baked into them, and those are the ones that do not just dip. Those are the ones that break first, break hardest, and take the longest to come back. This video is about those 10 towns, and I'm going to show you the exact fracture line in every single one, because a warning without a mechanism is just fear, and this channel does not do fear. Here's the part almost nobody tells you, and it is the reason this is not doom. Arizona is not crashing. I dug through the statewide numbers. In the spring of 2026, the typical Arizona home listed for around $468,000, down about 3.5% from a year before. That was actually one of the larger declines in the country, and Phoenix itself has started to see prices slip. But it is still a market softening, not falling off a cliff. And most serious forecasters expect the state as a whole to stay roughly flat rather than crash. So why make this at all? Because that gentle statewide number is an average, and an average is a liar. It is the temperature of the whole ocean. It tells you nothing about the one rip current you are about to swim into. Underneath that calm 3.5%, some towns are holding perfectly steady, and some have a crack running through them that a cooling market pries wide open. The average hides both. Our whole job today is to pull the fragile ones out of the average and look at them one at a time. And these are not the towns you would guess. The fragile ones almost always look completely fine from the road, completely fine in the listing. The weakness is somewhere nobody checks, under the ground, in the insurance file, in the single road out of town, in the question of who is even allowed to buy the house from you 15 years from now. One rule before we count them down, the same rule every time. Every town gets both halves. I will show you the fracture, and I will tell you honestly what still works about the place, because none of these are worthless. They are simply the ones carrying the most risk into a softening market, and the people about to buy there have mostly never been told. Let us start the countdown. Number 10. Maricopa. Not the county, the city of Maricopa, south of the Phoenix metro. Fast-growing, affordable newer homes, big yards, young families, a place that genuinely rebuilt itself after 2008 flattened it. On the surface, a value story. Here is the fracture. Almost the entire city funnels out to the metro on essentially one road, State Route 347. And between July of 2017 and June of 2022, that single road logged 967 crashes. When there is a bad wreck on it, the town does not get slow traffic. The town gets cut off. Now, why does that break first in a downturn? Because a town's home values are capped by how badly people want to live there, and a single fragile artery is a hard ceiling on that desire. In a hot market, buyers overlook the commute. In a cooling market, that commute is the first thing they use to negotiate you down, and the town with a built-in weakness stalls, while its neighbors merely pause. Road projects are underway, and if they truly fix the bottleneck, this eases. But until they land, Maricopa's ceiling sits lower than its price tag admits. Number 9. Apache Junction. Apache Junction sits at the eastern edge of the metro under the Superstition Mountains, and it makes this countdown because it carries two fracture lines at once, which is exactly the kind of thing a cooling market punishes hardest. The first is fire and insurance, and people assume that is a northern Arizona problem. It is not. The desert wildland interface around the superstitions is real fire country, and I will get deep into the insurance mechanism in a minute because it is the quiet killer running through half this list. The second fracture is the housing stock itself. A large share of Apache Junction grew up as older, manufactured and mobile homes, much of it built in the 1970s and 80s for winter visitors. That kind of housing has a specific problem. It depreciates. Older manufactured homes do not hold value the way stick-built houses do. Many of them sit on rented land, where you own the home but not the dirt under it, and the ground rent can climb every year. They are harder to finance, harder to insure, and in these worsening summers, an older unit with a tired air conditioner is a liability, not a refuge. Stack it together: depreciating housing, land you may not own, rising insurance, brutal heat, all in a market that is already softening. That is a value profile that can slide downhill while the glossy statewide average holds flat. The setting is genuinely spectacular, and for the right buyer with the right specific property, it works. But as a place to park your last big money and expect it to hold, you have to look very hard at what you are actually standing on. Number 8. Bullhead City. Bullhead City sits right on the Colorado River in the far west of the state, and here the fracture is the economy underneath the water view. It is a lovely idea. Riverfront, boating, Nevada 10 minutes across the bridge, no state income tax. But here is the number that tells the story. Roughly 1 in 4 of Bullhead City's working residents commutes across that river every day to work in the casinos and resorts of Laughlin. A quarter of the town's paychecks are written, in effect, by somebody else's tourist season. Add in the local retail and service jobs that also live or die on those visitors, and you have an economy leaning hard on discretionary spending. And it is regularly one of the hottest cities in the entire country, with a record that has touched 125 degrees. Why does that matter for a downturn? Because a town whose paychecks depend on discretionary tourist spending is a town whose buyers get shaky the moment the broader economy tightens. When people stop taking casino trips, the jobs soften, and when the jobs soften, the local housing demand softens right behind them. The waterfront is real value, but it is value sitting on a seasonal, tourism-dependent foundation, and that foundation wobbles first when money gets tight. Number 7. Yuma. Yuma earns its spot for a fracture that is easy to miss because the town has a genuine identity. It is the sunniest city on Earth, a real winter destination, and the agriculture that grows a huge share of America's winter greens keeps it employed. All true. Here is the crack. Yuma's economy stands on 3 legs: agriculture, the military, and winter tourism, and none of them builds a broad, diversified, high-wage job market. Wages genuinely run low, often right at the state minimum, noticeably below what neighboring counties pay. And the seasonal swing is enormous. Every winter, roughly 90,000 snowbirds pour in and very nearly double the town's population, then vanish by May. A huge share of the housing demand is those second home and seasonal buyers. In a cooling market, a town propped up on seasonal second home demand is exposed, because a second home is the very first thing a nervous household sells or stops buying when the economy turns. The people who keep Yuma's winter market humming are, almost by definition, people with the flexibility to walk away from it. That makes the demand real but fragile, and fragile demand is what cracks first when the tide goes out. Number 6. Prescott and the Rim Country. Pine, Strawberry, that whole band of high pine towns. Now we get to the fracture that runs through more of this list than any other. So let me explain it properly, because it is the one that is quietly reshaping value all over the state. It is not fire, it is insurance. Across Arizona, home insurance premiums climbed roughly 48% between 2021 and 2024. In 2024 alone, the average premium jumped over 11%, the 4th largest increase in the entire country. And that is the statewide average, dragged down by safe suburban Phoenix. Up in the high fire zones, the towns exactly like Prescott and the Rim Country, it is far worse. Premiums there have been climbing 12 to 18% a year. Wildfire deductibles have leapt to $5,000 and $10,000, and some individual homeowners have watched their premium double in a single year. And it gets worse than price, because carriers are not just charging more up there, they are leaving, refusing to renew, pulling out of high-risk zip codes entirely. The state got alarmed enough to launch a formal investigation into how bad it is getting. Here is why that is a collapse mechanism and not just an annoyance. A house that is becoming impossible to insure is a house that is becoming impossible to mortgage, because you generally cannot get a loan on a home you cannot insure. And when a buyer cannot get a loan, your pool of buyers shrinks to people paying cash. Fewer buyers means a lower price, and in a downturn, that effect compounds fast. The fire never has to reach your street. The insurance model reaching your zip code is enough to break the value. These are beautiful places to live, and I have recommended that pine country myself. But the insurance file up there is now the single most important document in the transaction, and almost nobody reads it until the first renewal, after they already own the house. Number 5. Payson. Payson is the postcard version of that exact fracture, which is why it sits higher on the list. 90 minutes from Phoenix, 5,000 feet, wrapped in the largest ponderosa pine forest on Earth, summers in the 80s while the valley bakes. It is genuinely wonderful, and the same insurance vice I just described is closing on it directly. Everything that makes Payson beautiful, the trees, the forest, the cool green, is the exact thing driving its fire exposure and its insurance trajectory the wrong way. And because Phoenix money has been buying weekend and retirement homes up there for 40 years, a lot of the demand is discretionary second home demand, which, as we have seen, is the first to evaporate when money tightens. Put a rising uninsurability problem on top of a discretionary buyer base in a cooling market, and you have a town that is far more fragile than its lovely Main Street suggests. If this is landing for you, a quick like genuinely helps it reach the people it is actually for, which is anyone about to sign on one of these places, and that is the only reason I mention it. Number 4. Sun City and Sun City West. Now this one is different, because it is the single place on this list where the decline is not a forecast at all. It is already showing up in the numbers, right now. Sun City is age restricted. At least one person in the household has to be 55 or older. That is the whole appeal, and it is also the fracture. When you go to sell, your buyer cannot be everyone. It has to be a retiree who specifically wants an age-restricted community in a valley that now has dozens of newer competitors with better kitchens. And the original housing stock is 60 years old, built between 1960 and 1978, with original everything and floor plans from an era that never thought about walk-in showers or wheelchairs. Here is the number that turns that from a theory into a fact. In the spring of 2026, the median sale price in Sun City West was down about 6.5% from a year earlier. Down 6.5%, when the state as a whole was down only 3.5%. It is falling nearly twice as fast as Arizona overall. And homes in Sun City proper are sitting on the market around 75 days before they sell. That is the clearest, already happening signal on this entire list. The age-restricted segment has the narrowest buyer pool and the oldest housing, so it is the first slice of the market to soften, and the data is showing it in real time. None of this makes it a bad place to live. Hundreds of thousands of people have loved it, and if you are going for the life and not the investment, go. But if you are counting on that house to hold its value and pass something on, stare hard at that 6.5%, because it already happened. Number 3. Willcox. I have to be honest here, because I recommended Willcox on this channel not long ago as a place retirees thrive, and I stand by why. It is cheap, it sits above 4,000 feet so the summers are bearable, it has Arizona's real wine country, all true. And then the data caught up with me. Willcox sits on a groundwater basin that, for most of its history, nobody regulated at all. Big agricultural operations pumped it, and the water table has been falling for decades. In 2025, satellite data made the consequence impossible to ignore. The ground in the Willcox Basin is sinking by as much as 6 inches every single year. That is the fastest rate of sinking anywhere in the state. Since the 1950s, parts of it have dropped by as much as 12 feet. The land is literally caving as the water is drained out from under it, opening long cracks that tear across roads and fields and drying up people's wells. Think about what that does to value in a soft market. Your well is chasing a water table that keeps falling, which is a real and rising cost. The ground itself can shift under a foundation. And as that story spreads, and it is spreading, the pool of people willing to buy a home on sinking, overpumped ground shrinks. The state finally named the basin a management area in 2024, which may slow the pumping. It does not lift the land back up. That compaction is permanent, and permanent damage is exactly the kind of thing that breaks a value and does not let it recover. Number 2, Rio Verde foothills. This is the house I opened with. Northeast of Scottsdale, big custom homes, mountain views, a median that ran around $825,000. And on the first day of January 2023, several hundred of those households turned on the tap and got nothing, because many of those homes had never been connected to a real water system. Water came by truck, and the city of Scottsdale, managing its own Colorado River shortage, stopped selling to the haulers. What is a beautiful $800,000 home worth on the afternoon it has no water and no guaranteed way to get any? Briefly, the answer was almost nothing. Sales froze, buyers ran, and it took a lawsuit and a new state law and most of a year before a reliable supply came back and values could even begin to recover. I am putting it near the very top not because it is about to happen there again tomorrow, a fix is in place, but because it is the cleanest proof in modern Arizona history that an invisible problem can vaporize enormous value overnight. It is the pattern every other town on this list is a quieter version of. And number 1, the Wildcat parcel on the dirt road, anywhere in rural Arizona. I am ending on this instead of one more named town because it is the most fragile thing you can buy in this entire state, and it does not have a name. It is a type of property, and it is for sale all over Arizona right now. Here is what it is. Out beyond the regulated management areas, there is a specific kind of land deal. A big parcel gets split into 5 lots, because splitting it into 6 would trigger county review and hard questions about water. Then each of those 5 gets split again and again. And what grows out of that, one quiet split at a time, is something that looks exactly like a neighborhood, with houses and mailboxes and neighbors, but that no one ever reviewed as a neighborhood. Nobody ever had to prove the water underneath it could support all those homes. That is precisely what Rio Verde Foothills was. The number 2 entry on this list, the $800,000 house that went to nearly nothing, sat in exactly this kind of arrangement. And more of them are forming right now, in unregulated basins, some on the same overpumped, sinking ground we saw in Willcox. This is the most fragile thing on the list because it stacks every fracture we have talked about into one property. No assured water. Maybe a well chasing a dropping table. Maybe ground that is compacting. Rising insurance if there is any fire exposure. And not one word of it disclosed because there is no line on the form that requires it. The listing says, beautiful custom home on acreage with mountain views. Every word is true, and none of the risk is anywhere on the page. In a hot market, these sell fine. In a cooling market, a property with no assured water and no clear buyer is exactly the kind of thing that does not just lose value, it becomes genuinely hard to sell at any price, which is what collapse actually looks like at the level of a single family. So how do you protect yourself? Because that is the whole point of this. Before you buy any rural Arizona property, you ask 5 questions, and you ask them in writing. 1. Is this inside an active management area? Yes or no? 2. What basin am I in, And what has the water table done here over the last 20 years? 3. If there is a well, how deep is it and when was it drilled? 4. Is this land in a wildfire zone and can I actually get insurance on it? At what price? And 5. The one almost nobody asks. What happens to this house if the water arrangement it quietly depends on stops? Because the people in Rio Verde could not answer that last question either. Right up until the morning, the tap ran dry. Now, step back and look at the whole countdown, because there is a single thread running through all 10. Every one of them looks completely fine from the road. Every one looks fine in the listing. The heat you can feel and the view you can see. But the thing that actually decides whether the value holds, the water under the ground, the insurance in the file, the one road out, the buyer pool a decade from now, is invisible at the exact moment you sign. And I want to be straight about something, because 3 of these towns, Willcox, Payson, the Rim Country, are places I genuinely recommended on this channel a few weeks ago and still see the appeal of. Nothing about them got worse as places to live. What changed is that I looked harder at what decides their value in a cooling market, and the honest answer moved them onto this list. That is not me contradicting myself. That is what doing the research properly looks like, and I would rather give you the fuller picture than the simple version that leaves out the crack. So do not use the statewide average as your answer. Use it as a starting point. Then go find the fracture. Ask the invisible questions, in writing, before you fall in love with the kitchen. Because the towns that hold their value through a downturn are not the ones with no risk. They are the ones whose risk you looked straight in the eye and decided you could live with. If this was useful, subscribe, because the next one is the practical companion to this whole series. The complete, honest checklist for buying a retirement home in this state. Every question from every one of these episodes, water, insurance, value, fire, the single road, in one place, in the exact order you should ask them, so you never end up owning one of these fractures by accident. That is where we go next.